Hey, chapter 19. Kip, thanks for doing that last one. That was a doozy. My first marathon. I first began running or jogging when I was in my second year of college. It was my thought time. I would think about a lot of things, from gospel questions I had to thoughts on some of the classes that I was currently in. I also discovered that it was a great way to prepare for talks for church. I was in the branch presidency and president of the LDSSA, Latter-day Saints Student Association. I also realized how good I always felt after a long jog of 2 to 4 miles back then. Jogging also became so incredibly needful to me when I was going through a stressful time in my life, such as a divorce. After graduating, and as I was then teaching at the Missoula Vocational Technical College, jogging became cemented as part of my daily routine. I returned the day after Pat and I were married. She jogged 5 miles with me. She knew that I loved jogging and wanted to surprise me with her ability to keep up with me on a 5 mile run. I remember that it about killed her, but she did it that morning. After we moved to West Jordan, I settled in on a routine jogging path that was about 5 miles from our house. I jogged from 7200, turned right, and continued to Redwood Road and back. On Saturdays, I turned right on Redwood and jogged south to 7800 and back. On one of those Saturdays, I decided to do a longer run, so I headed across Redwood on down past where there was a canal and a place where everyone stopped to feed the ducks. This became my new Saturday 10-mile run. It was about this time that I started to think about maybe running a marathon. I thought it would be great to actually run a marathon and finish. It seemed like it would be such an incredible accomplishment. As a side note, I am someone who thinks, analyzes, and ponders before I decide to do something that requires commitment and could be difficult to accomplish. This has always been this way with me. I finally committed to do it, but had no idea how to train for it. This was, of course, long before the internet. I assumed that training for it, you would just run longer distances until you were ready to run 26.2 miles. I also read articles in magazines that gave tips here and there. Carb loading was a big thing to do, which was to have a huge meal of spaghetti or lasagna the night before the marathon. I also read that one should never run over 19 miles in preparation for the marathon. I ran 15 miles every Saturday as race day approached. Just 1 week prior to July 24th, 1988, which was the day of the marathon, I joined a group that was going to run the 19 miles of the actual race, which began at some point up Parley's Canyon and ended at Hogle Zoo. We parked our vehicles near the finish point and were given a ride up to where we would be the starting point. This was the farthest I'd ever run. It turned out great, and I felt good after finishing. The day of the marathon arrived, and as per our plans, Pat took me up to the drop-off place at 5 a.m. and then returned to get the rest of the family ready. My father had spent the night, as I remember, and would be at the finish line along with Pat and the kids. The morning was chilly, and I was anxious to get started to warm up a little. I remember thinking how surprised I was at the number of other runners, and as the shot was fired that signaled the race was on, everyone seemed to be running in place. I was at the back of the group. It felt so good as we started up East Canyon. The sun was just starting to come up, and the air smelled so good with the fresh morning smell of the mountains. The lead runners were at full speed going down East Canyon, as some of us were still going up to the turnaround spot. I remember coming back down East Canyon when the endorphins kicked in, and I felt so into the race. This began to change a bit as I was halfway up Parley's, which was about 5 miles of steep grade. I remember keeping pace with another runner at this time in the marathon. He was friendly, and I liked to talk as we ran, which is something that I always disliked and would decline if someone asked to jog with me. As we were getting to the top of Parley's, I started to feel my first bit of fatigue and asked him if he had run a marathon before. He seemed to be fine with our pace, which was actually his pace that I was trying to keep with. He replied, "Oh yes, this is my fifth. I ran the Boston earlier this year." At that point, I knew why I was becoming fatigued. I had been at a faster pace than I'd ever run. I began to back off my pace a little and let him and another person running with us slowly move ahead. After reaching the top of Parley's, the downhill part felt so good, but soon turned into its own different pain. I remember just wanting to turn around and run uphill. The downhill grade was 7 miles. It felt good when it leveled out, which I believe was about the 15-mile mark. I could feel my energy beginning to go and the fatigue settling in. I knew I'd started out at too high a pace. I was getting close to the 19-mile mark, which was where they say you hit the wall, or that you're totally out of fuel and you keep going just on endurance. Looking back on this experience, I must add here to the story, I believe that eating or drinking or stopping or anything in a marathon was cheating. It would have been such a different experience back then if I had been drinking and fueling at points along the way. When I got about a mile past Hogle Zoo, which I believed was about the 20-mile mark, I was done. I was looking to see exactly where I was and how to get to the park where the finish was and where our van would be parked. I was done. Suddenly, to my surprise, this van of 11 kids began slowly to pass me, and there was a man in the back of the van with his monster size, as it seemed, video camera filming me. You have got to be kidding me. But the part I always remember was seeing my son Todd staring at me from through the van side window with his look on his face that said, "Wow, that is my dad running a marathon." I tear up almost every time I think of that moment. In fact, I am reaching for the Kleenex right now as I type. How can I quit now? And and to my own dad, would you please throw that stupid video camera out the window? Well, the rest is history. I endured the finish. My time was 3 hours and 47 minutes. The last 6.2 miles was pure willpower and not willing to quit. How could I? I remember how hard it was to keep running the last 2 miles. It still sticks in my mind today. Another interesting thing that I remember was how incredibly sore I was the next day, and how that never occurred again after other marathons that I ran in years after. I retired the t-shirt that was given to my closet where it hung from 1988 to about 2020. I was getting ready to take it to the DI when Ashley happened to be over at our house. I asked her if she wanted it. She got way excited and said she did. Little did I know what she had in mind. In 2022, Ashley called me and told me that she planned on running the Deseret News, my first marathon, wearing my original shirt, and was going to take first place in tribute to me. She spent the night with us and took her to we took her to the drop-off point at 5 a.m. As she walked to the bus, she turned, looked into my eyes and said, "Dad, I'm going to win this for you." It was a tender moment that I will always remember. Well, the rest is history. She won. I have many children that are runners to this day. And here's a picture of Ashley coming through the finish line. Ashley with Dad and Ashley with Mom and Dad. And that's it.